This webinar is titled, How I Became a Published Author and Charter Member of Author Masterminds. Before we get started, let's talk about what this webinar is and what it isn't. This is not a webinar to sell anything. You will not be asked to purchase one of my books or to become a client of my publisher. As the title states, today's webinar is my story about how I became a published author and a charter member of Author Masterminds, and why that may be important to you. In the next few minutes we spend together, I think you'll enjoy learning about me. I know I'm looking forward to meeting you, even if it's only online. If we are neighbors, we probably talk together over the back fence. I live in a small town in one of the flyover states, but the town is full of inquiring minds who enjoy an amusing and skillful storyteller. That's my niche, an entree into conversations. Here's one thing I'd like you to know. I'm a charter member of Author Masterminds, connecting authors and readers in new, unique ways. I'll tell you more about Author Masterminds later. I spent 10 years in research to produce my first book, Last Phoenix, and was altogether convinced that it was the new great American novel. Doesn't every novelist think that? Forgive me for bragging, but there are more than a few Viet Nam vets who think it is such a book. Without such chutzpah, it's difficult to persist with the arduous task of writing a novel, especially a rather long one like Last Phoenix. Like most worthwhile endeavors, however, one's own arrogance has to give way to reality, and the new author has to develop enough humility to be able to learn. Literary agents, some 150 of them, were less sanguine about the book than me. More accurately, they were not interested even in my query letter. In fact, the hardest thing I encountered was having an agent or editor actually even read an excerpt from one of my books. I read a good many excellent books that never got to first base, and I try to support such promising authors in their quest to be read and appreciated. Two had read the book. One found it interesting, but not to her taste, and the other said it needed more work to make it professional. End of story. That was at the outset. The first reader was my UPS delivery lady. She thought there were too many big words, like cacophony. I asked her if she knew what the word meant. She said she did. I asked her how to convey the episode being described without using such a multisyllabic word, and she agreed that the word was perfect. She eventually read it and asked me a myriad of questions. The next, my editor's expert, upset me and inspired me. My books got better. I went hunting in Alaska and as usual took my manuscript with me to tweak it. I had recently come to the obvious conclusion that significant tweaking was in order. I met my nephew after the hunt and learned that he was an artist for an illustrated children's book and that he and the author were working with a very congenial publishing company in Anchorage called Publication Consultants. He arranged for me to bring my manuscript to the publisher, Evan Swenson, for consideration. In retrospect, that was fateful, the beginning of my career as a writer. Evan did me the courtesy of listening to my explanation of the book and took the manuscript to read and evaluate. The man was and is a gentleman and an expert. I valued his generosity with his time and have relied on his expertise ever since. With his help, I do believe that my books have become sophisticated, captivating, and compelling, and under his tutelage, each book is better than the last. A short time later, Evan called me to tell me that he thought it was an excellent book, but it definitely needed polish. Unlike my previous experience, Evan went on to give me practical suggestions, including submitting the transcript to an editor for a complete evaluation. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Drink deep or drink not from the Pyrenean stream, John Locke said. I took John's and Evan's advice to heart. From that encounter, I learned to punctuate and to spell. Apparently my 17 years of post-high school schooling had been lacking to some degree. My experience with the English language gave me a 500,000 word vocabulary and some inaccurate sense of being an expert in the use of that language. When I came to admit that I was not an expert, I was a bit dismayed, but hunkered down to get it right. That was real work, and the work paid off. I rewrote the book. Evan had me do it again for a final submission. and the book was published. Actually, I rewrote that book and my other books at least a dozen times each, until they were almost completely free of amateurish errors, and in so doing, the characters, the settings, and the story were honed to be the best I could do. I have read novels by prominent authors that have not put in the sweat equity to perfect their books to the degree that I have. People who read Last Phoenix have found it a fascinating story and learning experience. Others rejected it because it's too long. I read and enjoyed Candide by Voltaire, which is a short, pithy, fascinating, and in comparison to Last Phoenix, a pamphlet. I worked assiduously through Les Miserables by poet and novelist Victor Hugo, which in comparison to my book is an encyclopedia. Different strokes for different folks, but I stand by the quality of my book, whatever its length. I submitted a second book to Evan, which would also be long, except that Evan insisted that the autofictional story of my life and career, Saga of a Neurosurgery, needed to be divided into 6 books. I disagreed with Evan. I liked Les Miserables and War and Peace. But Evan is right, I have to admit, in this modern world. People want a book that is not only compelling, but can be read on one's airplane trip to the Caribbean. In Saga, there are 6 of them. So read all of them, start with number 1, and read to the end of number 6. Then you'll have the story, the enlightenment, the fun, the exasperation, the education. A third book, All in Jest, is a shorter novel about the conflicts of the malpractice world that are faced by physicians who undertake the treatment of serious and complicated disease processes. You learn something about the world of neurosurgery, the battleground of malpractice litigation, and the fun of watching the worm turn. Then came Gog and Magog, followed by Sheepdog and the Wolf, and Finders, Keepers, Losers, Weep. All in Jest's protagonist, Sybil Norcroft, became the subject of a 6-book novella series. Both of my novella series were a challenge, almost as difficult as writing 12 novels, because the characters, plot, setting, explanations, and excitement all had to be there, but in a strategically shortened version that could not be abbreviated or appear to be abbreviated on purpose. Again, read each series from book 1 to the end of book 6 to get yourself hooked, entertained, and satisfied. During the time I developed the 6th Sybil Norcroft novella series, I wrote The Trojan Horse in the Belly of the Beast trilogy. This was a cathartic book which enabled me to ventilate against a nation which boasts that one of its prominent exports is terrorism, and which desires above all else to destroy the great Satan, my beloved America. It is a war fought with intelligence, not bullets, with tenacity rather than set battles. It was the most difficult of my books to research and to have the action real, authentic, and convincing. Perhaps the most fun series to write was the Joseph McGee Private Investigator novella 6-book series. I had loads of fun creating this improbable and genius character. If you have trouble, his PI firm is where to go, but beware, he's likely to love the truth more than he does you. Private investigator Joseph McGee gets involved in a variety of dirty organizations, including Homeland Security, a popular cult, human trafficking, Indian reservation government, the corporate world, and a pharmaceutical consortium. He's even assisted in areas by Sybil Norcroft. A team of Joseph Aloysius Michael John McGee and a brilliant neurosurgeon, TV anchor, investigator, and secret government agent. How could they fail in their goals to entertain you? All this time I was reaching out and researching for another bigger book, The Charlemagne Murders, the murder of 6 World War II generals, leads to the greatest manhunt in history. I'll bet you a milkshake that you have never heard of the story I tell as fiction, but where the real history is as stunning as any you have ever read, fiction or non-fiction. Health issues sidelined my research and writing for many months, but now I'm on a positive mend, and I'm back to writing and I'm excited about my next book. That book is half done, and so far as it's the most fun of any I've written. Stay tuned. This is where Author Masterminds comes into the publishing picture. Author Masterminds is a different kind of website built to help readers discover and to get to know an exclusive group of like-minded, serious, and dedicated authors. Each author's pages includes website, social media, and even contact information. Consequently, you get to know the authors personally, not just their work. This is a great idea for writers, readers, critics, and students of the craft. As I mentioned earlier, Author Masterminds connects authors and readers in a new and unique way. Here you'll find that every reader is a friend and every author approachable. My greatest pleasure in writing is attempting to connect with you, my readers, and to help in any way I can to see you through the research, the writing, the engagement of an agent, publisher, and a readership of your own great American novel. Every writer has to have a niche audience to make his or her book a success. It took me a while to identify for myself who constitutes my ideal reader. Here is something of a list of qualities: intelligent, well-educated, well and diversely read, inquisitive, excited to learn new things, especially about history, warfare, medicine, various kinds of attacks and responses, loves spy novels and action thrillers, and is not averse to exposure to ideas that differ from his or her own background or cherished traditions. I love my readers. They are the life's blood and the raison d'etre for my efforts. I want to entertain you, educate you, argue with you, convince you, or have you convince me and get me off into another novel with another view. If you love spies, assassins, terrorists, cops, con men and women, geniuses, superior opponents headed towards a great fall, cyber terrorism, cheats headed for the fate of most Ponzi schemers, vile villains and not entirely saintly protagonists, you are my man or woman. More than incidentally, I want to get to know you enough to learn your story as I share mine. Without apology, I want somehow to use your story in my next book, or the next one after that. I want to be part of a fan club, composed of people with the qualities described above. It would not be my fan club, but rather, I can to a limited measure be a spokesman for our club. I have learned from my LinkedIn contacts that our fan club is people with such diverse interests as writing, teaching, border patrol issues, tactical nuclear problems, the personal stories of veterans, WNDs, ferreting out secret candidates, entering the full enthusiasm into the war on terrorism, rogue nations with nuclear aspirations, thieves on a grand scale, monsters who prey on women, children, and the otherwise vulnerable, cultists who brainwash naive followers, Ponzi schemers, government predators like the like of Huey P. Long, and all those whose lives' goals are to injure others to further their own greed and villainy. I write mostly for my own satisfaction, to do something that approaches art, and to convey messages in effective ways to further concepts that are important to me. Agree with me or not, I believe you'll find the unspoken arguments in my words something to make you wonder and think. I believe, as my publisher believes, that facts and stories sell. What I have to sell are stories, valid opinions, and the truth. Good ideas for books are hard to come by. I look for your insights into my past books and suggestions for future books to keep me on being successful. 3 of my books came from friends, neighbors, patients, military comrades, and readers. I would value your stories. I might well use something you tell me, but of course, I will honor your privacy and will change places, dates, and names to protect the guilty, as I always do. Are you attracted to compelling drama and intrigue? Do you enjoy long, complex, and rich details? I have to concede that not everyone likes long books, harsh reality, or facts that conflict with their own religious or political persuasions. However, I have a friend from the Viet Nam War who told me that Last Phoenix was too real, and he has read the book multiple times and tries to get others to read it, lest we forget. I have 2 doctor friends who have suffered through malpractice suits. After reading All in Jest, both of them had a laugh and said, "Right on." 2 of my German friends suffered all the way through the work of digesting the Charlemagne murders, which brought back terrible memories. Each of them said, "Finally, some real, fair, and objective truth about that horrible period of history. Thanks." I have a large number of friends who email me to let me know that they richly enjoyed the entertainment of reading Gog and Magog, Trojan Horse in the Belly of the Beast trilogy, Sheepdog and the Wolf, Finders Keepers, Losers Weep, and the 6 books of the Sybil series, and the 6 of the McGee series. I get compliments comparing me to fine authors like Michener, Grisham, Follett, Patterson, Clancy, Baldacci, and even Leon Uris. I'm obviously flattered by such comparisons, but I take the suggestions to heart to see how I can improve. I suppose my ultimate good is to become that good. Are you fond of vivid and engaging books? For me, much of the stuff of storytelling of good books comes from personal experience, and I have intentionally woven my own small dramas into the warp and woof of the fabric of my books. I include my own recollections of a boyhood in a rough and tumble western town, the harsh realities of the death of my father when I was young and had to become a man prematurely, the great mistakes I made, such as getting into Stanford with a very inadequate preparation from my small town high school, the struggles and joys in university, medical school, the Navy, and in professional medical practice, with the eventual necessity to practice in several disparate specialties, and with my own and my wife's own medical horror stories, near death and life-changing experiences. Poets and ballad singers stress that adversity and sorrow become their muse for the creation of their poetry and music. I can agree with them. The crucibles of adversity of my life have heightened my ability to empathize with other people and to come to understand the human condition in a way that I believe translates into conveyance of truth and believability in my written works that transcend simple imaginative writing. I treasure the response from readers who do not even know me personally, who tell me that certain scenes are so real that they must be autobiographical. At times they are, or at least autofictional. Publication consultants decided that I needed an identifier after my name, which would say in a few words what the reader should expect. The unanimous decision was neurosurgeon turned author writes with gripping realism. I believe that's accurate. If you enjoy this style of storytelling, in all modesty, I have to let you, the members of the fan club, know that I aspire to be the king of the genre, to live up to the descriptor. Neurosurgeon turned author writes with gripping realism. I suppose that makes my place in our fan club that of a benevolent monarch. Okay, maybe there's not a strong consensus on that. So let's argue about that and other things which occupy your minds. Read a book. Become a critic. A benevolent one. And let us argue over the backyard fence. Thanks for being here today. I look forward to visiting with you again.